You've entered Bookstorm with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Well, welcome listeners. You're in for a real treat today. Here's an author you've been waiting for, you've been messaging, excited that we posted this on our pages. We have the witty, super intelligent, amazing Lisa Scottoline, and we're talking about a book that is just about to come out, What Happened to the Bennetts. Lisa is a #1 best-selling author. She is the New York Times best-selling author and an Edgar Award-winning author of 33 novels, plus nonfiction books. She graduated magna cum laude in 3 years at UPenn. Wow, impressive. Then she decided to go to UPenn Law School and graduated cum laude again. She writes a weekly column with her daughter, Francesca Saratella, for the Philadelphia Inquirer titled Chick Wit, which is a witty and fun take from a woman's perspective on life. She has over 30 million copies of her books in print, and Lisa is published in over 35 countries. I want to give you a little glimpse of some of her nonfiction titles because it gave me such a laugh. Some of her titles are I Need a Lifeguard Everywhere But the Pool. I've got sand in all the wrong places. Does the beach make me look fat? And why my third husband is a dog. We are just going to want to check out these books, absolutely, for sure. Lisa has so many awards and accolades. I'm just going to name a few for our listeners. Mystery Writers of America, awards and nominees and winners. Publishers Weekly Magazine, Cosmopolitan Magazine, awards from the University of Pennsylvania, Italian Heritage and Cultural Committee of New York, Weinberg Library at the University of Scranton, Seek, Diet Coke Literary Promotion. She has an honorary doctorate of law degree from Westchester University. Wow. Lisa lives in Philadelphia with an array of disobedient pets, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Welcome, welcome.
You are such a sweetheart, and you did so much homework. You didn't have to do that.
Well, that's part of the fun of it for us because we love your books, but it's a lot of fun to take a look at the bio, see all your accomplishments, where you got started, where you came from. It's inspirational to the rest of us. We love having you on here today, Lisa.
Well, that's very kind of you to say because I really love that. I really want, if people are listening who want to write, I really want to encourage them. And believe me, if I can do it, they can do it. And I think my story, like my career path, if you really look at it, can really give a lot of encouragement to people. So I'd love to talk about that too. That's just terrific.
A wonderful, just wonderful.
Well, Lisa, we're here to talk about your upcoming book. It's about to come out next week called What Happened to the Bennetts. And for our listeners, we usually like to give a little bit of a short summary. So if you'll indulge me, I promise not to give away, any spoilers.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
What Happened to the Bennetts is, to me, a thrilling novel about choosing between the law and justice when your family's on the line. And I'm a lawyer, so to me, these justice themes were just incredible. Like you, I know that that's running through your mind when you're writing.
Right.
Jason Bennett is a nice guy, suburban dad. He owns a court reporting business. And one night, as he's driving his family down a very dark road, they're coming back from a field hockey game, a pickup truck begins tailgating them. And unfortunately, a tragedy unfolds that changes this family's trajectory forever.
Mhm.
That night, the FBI visits the family and says, "We need to put you into our protection program." They
Right.
have no choice but to go. And it's unusual because normally, if you're being secured by the FBI, it's because you maybe are an informant and you are in trouble
Exactly.
for that reason. But this family, they did nothing wrong. And so this
Right.
tears them apart. Um, when things begin to really fall apart and they are being squeezed from every direction, our Jason takes things into his own hands, and he really starts to look at justice as something he needs to do for his family. And what an
Right.
incredible approach to this
Oh, you're
character.
so kind. That's Kristen. That's a lovely way to put it too. Justice is something he has to do for his family. It's a
Yes.
challenge and kind of a good one in a way. Well, you have to say that all challenges are good, otherwise, you go crazy, right? But I mean, to write a modern story about law and justice, and as a former lawyer like you, but I think everybody cares about justice. Like actually, you don't need a law degree. So we go, what's right and what's wrong? And this is a very tumultuous time politically, legally. Look, there's Supreme Court hearings. We have a lot of polarization around law and justice. And to be frank, no matter what side of this polar spectrum you're on, um, we've been felt our institutions have let us down to a certain extent. And so when you're writing a thriller in that milieu, if I can get a little pretentious on your butt for a minute, you really got to, you can't write the stuff that I wrote before where law led to justice and the good guys won and you knew who the good guys were. So it was certainly a bit of a challenging because you have to still write a resonant novel that feels real to people. It can never be whitewashed or kind of BSy. And so that's the perfect way to put it, Kristen. It's justice is something he has to do for his own family. That's right.
And that ties into my first question. And for
Sure.
our listeners, I'm just going to say, Lisa, here's my one word for this book: brilliant. You have
Oh,
woven such an incredible mystery. And I want to talk about the details, the clues, the investigation, but I can't give away any spoilers.
right.
Sometimes I laughed right out loud, sometimes I
Good.
cried. And you know what I love about a good mystery? And you delivered. You give the reader credit that we have enough intelligence to figure this out. And you give us just enough clues to do that. And we may figure it out or we may not. But hindsight, when it's all done, we thought, oh, there it was. Oh, I should have caught that. I should have. And I
Oh,
did
that's
catch a
right.
lot of those. And when you do, it's so satisfying as a reader. What I wanted to bring out in this book is Jason, the dad, says, and it goes along with what Kristen just said, I had to do whatever it took to get justice for my family. And you allowed this character to grow in amazing ways. He found this hidden courage, strength, wisdom that I don't even think he knew he possessed. The reader looks at this character, we kind of crawl inside him and we want to become him. And we leave with
Aw.
this idea that, hey, maybe I would even be capable of something like this. Maybe I have this instilled in me, this precious possibility that I could rise up and protect my family. I wondered, is this who you set out to show the reader who this character was, or did this character grow in ways that even you might have been surprised?
Right. That's actually true. The latter is true because I have no outline when I write. I'm kind of a gonzo person. That's why I'm divorced twice. I just jump right in. I go, oh, wait a minute. Maybe that wasn't a great idea.
Been there.
Reverse. So the dog just looked over. Should we show him the dog? Look at the
Yeah,
dog.
show
The
them.
dog. The dog. I know somebody's got to
Oh,
come.
look
Now
how
everyone
they're
just
being so well
you're
behaved.
being very good. Um, but what happened with this character is, whenever you're trying to write something, you go, you're thinking big. Like you're thinking, what is a hero? Right? It's just not a little story. It ends up being, what is a modern day hero? What is expected of a man? And I thought a lot about, for the first 20 years and 20 books, I only wrote women protagonists. I really felt like we were underserved and underrepresented. I still think we are. But also, it's like, well, try to write a guy. I mean, even though you're divorced twice, you know something about men. And also, you kind of like, I really was close to my dad. And this guy is probably the closest to my dad I've ever been in print, where he was a wonderful, he was on the quiet side. He was a very mellow guy and to me, was a little my hero. And I think he would have been surprised to know that. We're really close. We told each other we loved each other all the time. I never told him he was a hero of mine. I wish I had now. But I think I thought the other day that that phrase, great, some people have greatness thrust upon them. That's really what happens to him. And I felt like a little bit it resonated with me because in any hardship, look, let's talk about the pandemic. Been such an awful hard time. And so many people have so much loss. I've had loss to my family. We go, how do we go on? You find the strength within yourself. And if you have to. And I said, these circumstances, I don't plan the circumstances in advance. So all of a sudden he is perceiving the circumstances. I think partly too, I'm a single mom and always have been. So it's just me and my daughter. And now she's grown up and lives in New York. When you're in that position, you look around and you go, there's nobody else. Like, you're going to have to learn to do all these things, whatever the dopey thing is. Like, you have a fire behind you. It's a funny thing because I always had my exes, thing one and thing two. They were good at making fires. and they could also do barbecues. So it's something about fire, I get scared. I don't even like candles. But I'm like, I have to learn to make a fire because I love a fire in winter. And for a long time, my daughter did it. And then she moved away. I'm like, damn it, Lisa. Anyway, you get the point. Finally, I learned to make a fire. And then I said, this isn't that hard. Look at me making fires. It's a bad example, but a small one that I think I see in him. He owns his own business. I have a lot of friends who are in court reporting, as Kristen knows, and I was a paralegal before I was a lawyer and an adjunct law professor. There's a lot of periphery that aren't lawyers that know as much as lawyers and more, and you'd rather hang with, and don't have the egos maybe. And so, not to pile on lawyers, but that's always fun.
It's okay.
It's so right. It never gets old for me. And so, but basically, as I spotlight him, because he's really smart and he's really able, but he's never been put in this position before. And everything is collapsing, but he has to step into the breach, and he does.
And I think that's what we love about the character. And there's also this idea that hits the reader when faced with a crisis. I can't give a spoiler, but some huge crisis happens in Jason's life.
Right.
When faced with a crisis, like you said, and you're backed up against the wall, you're going to say, I'm just going for it.
Exactly.
Either you're going to fall apart and lay there, or you're going to find some inner strength and say, what do I have to lose now? I'm in crisis mode. I'm going for it. And
right.
I love this. It gave us all this like little bit of jolt of inspiration. Gave us all like a little courage. Like, what would we do in that situation? Well, maybe I could be like him.
Well, it's so unthinkable because I sort of wanted to look at the witness protection program, and I have an FBI guy who really helped me a lot. But it's so unthinkable to think about, and as Kristen pointed out, this distinction that these people aren't criminals. But just imagine, but really what's so to the point is the more modern day. Like that you can't even say goodbye. Like we're so connected. We're talking this way. I mean, the pandemic's been awful, but I love that we can do this. And I live alone, but I'm super connected to my bestie. We're texting each other all day. We walk, we do yoga, we go to the movies. This notion that all of a sudden you vanish. Imagine a family vanishing. Maybe 40 years ago, that might not have been a thing. 20 years ago, now you can't. People will go, what's going on? They're not quiet. Facebook gives everybody a voice, particularly in the suburbs, right? You have every suburban woman going, where are they? Where are her friends? My friends wouldn't let it go if I just vanished. She has to leave her mother. The kids are all connected up to soccer schedules, violin lessons, texting, Snapchat, all the mishigas that we all have. How do you vanish? They essentially go and they have to ghost everybody. And I sort of conceived it too with the ghost forest, and they have a ghost in their house. You can't do that so easily nowadays. It creates enormous strain. And it really raises a larger question about what the witness protection program can do for normal people. But also, what do normal people in that bind? It's sort of unprecedented. They have never lost a person in the witness protection program. But they don't have to deal with this, on the reg, as my daughter would say. So look at me trying to be cool to you guys. But that's really what's happening in the novel, I think.
Yeah, the social media aspect was huge. And not only did everyone wonder where they were, but then they went on social media to find the answers and to spread the news out. we're in a different world today.
Right?
News gets spread in crazy amounts of ways, and some fake news, some real news. But
Right?
that really struck me as so interesting, how the Friends had a little bit of power behind the scenes to say, "Hey, I want to know what happened here. Spread the
Right. And
word."
also, apropos what we're doing now, I listen to podcasts all the time. I walk the dogs for an hour a day, podcasts, audiobooks, whatever. But I wanted to go into that because, as you know, there is a true crime fiction community and they are solving real life murders. And they're online and they're on podcasts and they're getting together and I love that because I think justice should be in all of our hands. And police forces have limited budgets. They can't solve everything all the time. I mean, don't you want your family to and people who care? So, but they play a role in this too. And I didn't even plan that. I just started to go, wait a minute. I follow all this. They would follow this. So what happens with the Bennetts? They put a question mark on it and it becomes their podcast, but that's completely plausible. I mean, that's what would happen.
It's super realistic. It ties in with Kristen's next question, actually. It's very realistic. Everything in this book could really happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this theme of justice and lawlessness. In fact, you had a quote that I
Right.
thought was just really cool. Justice was an ocean, and that lawlessness was only islands in the water. But Jason concludes that it's different. When it comes to his family, there are no islands, but lawlessness everywhere. And I kept thinking about this because I'm a single parent too and have been for a very long time. So I think about what roles I take on as a mother, that protector, that everything to my kids, things I had to learn too. And I was thinking about, sometimes we don't trust the justice process. The legal system doesn't always work out in the way that it should. I have a case that's been going on for 11 years and my clients are in danger. And it makes me very upset because I think they haven't been served by the legal system. And I was wondering if you could kind of explore that a little bit. Why do people lose faith in the legal system? And what about lawlessness? I mean, there's reasons we want to avoid that too, right?
Oh, it's so important. And I never thought about it before now. And that's so nice of you to point out that sentence because I almost didn't leave it in because I'm like,
Wow.
no one's going to know what you're talking about. But it really became, look, I live in the world like everybody else.
Yes.
And I grew up, I'm a lot older than you guys, but I grew up and law always led to justice. Like we had like Perry Mason and law was supposed to effectuate justice. And if you look at it over time, then technicalities start to come in and then law starts to thwart justice. And then in the 60s, you have the attorney general going to jail. When you look at it now, let's just politics aside, we can talk about Putin. I think we all agree he's a bad guy, right? Okay, we're right on that. That's lawless, right? Tells a lie about this country, goes in and attacks them. What you start to see when you see lawlessness, and we've been watching Putin for a long time, right? This isn't the first time he's done it. He has gotten away with lawlessness. And as someone who cares about the law, like you do, Christine, and everybody does, I go, what difference does it make? Well, the difference it doesn't make is when you look at the stuff we've been reading, for example, that in recent history, we're sicker, we're unhappier, we're more neurotic, we're more in need of psychiatric help. What is the purpose of law? The purpose of law is to order us so that we are not at each other's throats or commit violence against each other. When lawlessness rises, violence rises. That's what's happening in our country, right? We're not sure where the law is. We've doubted our police. We either support them or we don't. We need to fund them or we don't. We have questions about things we never questioned before. When I started writing books, which was 35 years ago, most people could not name one justice as with the Supreme Court. Now the hearing's on TV and it's 4 days. That never happened. So you have to recognize that even as tumultuous as this is, it is also good that people are more involved and have opinions about law because law is made by people and they will demand certain laws, right? Or they will say, no, don't do that. And I guess I started to feel that complexity and how that changes the situation. And to a certain extent, it opens our eyes. And that's not the worst thing. So there aren't good guys. To digress for a moment, I'm a big fan of the popular culture. I go to all the Marvel movies. When I watch them as an author, as a writer, as someone who loves books. I go, what is happening here? What's happening is, what is a hero? What is a superhero? What is a man? What are the limits of our personal power? I just came back from the Spider-Man. It's not just one Spider-Man now, it's three. And they all work together. I'm like, that's great. I love it. Why are we interested in that? We're interested because that's what we're exploring. Now, Bennett's does that on a scalar that is more discrete and focused. It's one man. And we will all, going forward, find our way through a new world in which we do not rely on institutions to protect us. We cannot rely upon laws to protect us. It will make us nervous because there's no big daddy. On the other hand, I secretly don't think there ever was. And every single mom knows that. And I think to a certain extent, everybody, every person knows that. In the end, you have to make your own way and stand up for yourself while you still respect the rights of others. And that's all what we're trying to do, titrating it in different ways going forward. I think I've probably gotten far afield now, but you asked such a thoughtful question.
I love what you said, because when we, first of all, with the advent of social media, we can see some of the flaws in these institutions that maybe we didn't see before.
Exactly.
We understand the delay, sometimes unpredictable results. And I think that's a good thing, because there are things that need to change. We need to do better, right?
Well, look at the laws over battered women and against abuse against women. How that has become such a, people are aware of it in a way they never were. Yes. I've had my eyes opened on that, and like your client, you thought, wait a minute, I thought you were going to protect me. Well, you're on your 13th protective order, and nothing is getting done. And so the more we speak our truth and demand change, we will get it. Oh, we'll get it. Don't, all right? We're mouthy. I've learned.
That is the beauty in this country anyway, isn't it? That we can have a voice, and we can say, I don't agree with that law, and we can criticize it and fight against it. And
exactly to the point. I wake up every day grateful that I'm born in this country. And that the First Amendment, as you know, Christine, the First Amendment was the first for a reason. It was uppermost in the founder's mind. Uppermost.
I believe it.
Right? We're lucky. We're so lucky and blessed.
That's what I say too. So the other issue that really rose for us as the reader is this idea that you had this typical suburban family that was ripped and torn apart by tragedy. I can't say exactly what, but let me say real life statistics say that any married couple with hardships, financial stress, a sickly child, a child with special needs, a death in the family, most likely leads to divorce. It's tough enough being married without having these other issues. Yet, your characters, in a really wonderful, heartfelt, very honest way, managed to bind together. And I liked this quote in the book, forgiveness, that's what love is. That was like little words of wisdom that you had there, because that's kind of what keeps even friendships together. And I wondered, is this something you personally believe in?
You know, what's so crazy, and thank you for pointing that out, I didn't know that until I wrote it. I mean, I do think that Francis Ford Coppola, he's my little god, because he did the Godfathers, and he says, nothing in my movies ever happened, but all of it is true. And that's the thing about the arts. And I can speak specifically to book. You're trying to write something that's emotionally true. Now, as I said, I don't know how it ends. So I'm following this family as they go through this crisis in this marriage. And they're the core of this family. And I thought, and as I got there, you just put these people and they reveal themselves to you. I know it sounds really woo-woo, but I've done this for 35 years, and I believe in God, and I do think that he's looking out for people who don't make outlines when they write, And I found myself in that moment with these older, wiser men who are helping Jason and trying to save his life and his family, and I won't reveal more. And I thought, what would someone like that say? And I thought, oh my God, that's true. And listen, if you're divorced twice and you make as many jokes about it as I do, you haven't completely forgiven, okay? But that's the difference. Who do you still love and who do you not? Who's revealed themselves to you to be much less than you thought? I'm not going to cop to everybody's great. They're not. And I divorced them. But I know who I've been angry at, maybe wrongly, or who I can forgive. And I believe in that. And I thought, these distinctions that you have to love someone to forgive them, that's true, but maybe love really is forgiveness, and forgiveness love. There is evil in the world, like as Christine said, and Lynn Putin. We can't deny that it exists. We just have to be able to distinguish it from good because there is good in the world too. And that's what I write toward, and that's what gives me hope. And I think Jason too.
Absolutely. And I've always loved this idea that you had that of forgiveness. And the truth is, not everyone deserves that forgiveness. So you sort of
Right.
pick and choose. We're allowed to set these boundaries. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
and also I love when people say, it's a very common thought, I'm forgiving you for me, so I don't have to hold on to this anymore. So I'm forgiving it, I'm letting it go. Goodbye, see you later. You're not a
Right.
part of my life, but there is a sense or some type of a form of forgiveness in that that cuts that burden loose away from you. And
Right.
that spoke to it all in this story. I just thought that was a wonderful take with this family and everything that they went through and how they found still enough good in each other to hold on and mend it and make it work.
Well, that's so nice of you to say because I really think, you talk about concepts like law and justice, and they're cool and fun to talk about with smart people like you. But the real truth is, what matters is how it impacts people. Law impacts people. That's why we're all upset when we think bad guys like Putin don't get punished. We don't want to go in World War III. On the other hand, are we just going to let this happen? And all those questions we have as Americans, do we want to be world police? Or do we want to stand up for what's right or what? How are we going to figure this out? But I forgot what my point was.
Big
That
concepts.
happens to me all the time.
Yes, right, right. The concepts. The point is that what you want to understand is the relationship of law to a family. Like Christine, you started to say you have a client and a woman who's being abused or chased or terrified by someone. That's when you have to make it real because that's why it matters because of a family. I've always written about families and justice. I think my whole life, whether the setting is Mussolini's Rome, like my last book, or the historical fiction I'm writing now, which is set against in Sicily at the rise of the mafia. You're looking at why does law matter to people at your kitchen table? And that's what I hope Bennett's is.
And I also agree with something else you said. Kristen and I are big believers. Some people say to us, oh, we're not going to listen to your podcast because we only read nonfiction. And I say to them, wait a minute. There is no fiction that's all pretend. It's all built on things we already know and feel to be true. And inside any good fiction story, including this one, you're going to find real life changing truths, little golden nuggets, things that make you think different or feel different. And that's why we love fiction so much. And
Well,
this book.
that's really sweet of you to say. And I also think, as an aside, that anybody who's good enough to get on this show, you'll learn from all fiction. Like all the procedure in this is right. I had to teach myself about the WITSEC protection program. How in the early days, for example, it was a real surprise to me. I live in Pennsylvania. When I got my guy and I said, let's talk, what would be the first thing that happened? He taught me about the intake procedure. It takes a certain amount of time. It's under the jurisdiction of the FBI, not the U.S. Marshal Service. And I said, well, that's all very interesting, but like, where would I go? And I'm thinking, Arizona, Buffalo, someplace far from Pennsylvania. He's like, Delaware. I'm like, Delaware is 20 minutes from my house. Like, that's not what I thought. And so I never change facts. I mean, every single one of my novels, domestic thrillers, legal thrillers, historical fiction, is grounded on facts. And I do that because I know that, God bless readers, they read us and they learn about the law and justice and criminal and civil procedure from what we write. So we have to get the facts right. Honestly, particularly if you're a lawyer. I joke about lawyers, but I love that profession and I think it's a noble one. And if it has my name on it, it's got to be accurate. I drive myself nuts, not to whine, but trying to get accuracy in a book like What Happened to the Bennetts and saying, well, if this happened, they can say, well, that never happened before. But what if it did happen? What would you do? And they walk me through it. So your point is apropos. You learn about emotional truths from fiction, but you also learn things that are really interesting.
Yeah. One of the things that I loved about this book, it takes some of these big picture concepts that we were just talking about. Like, for example, we've used words like good and bad. And, I'm an adjunct as well at the law school, and I'll hear from students a lot of times, well, there's no such thing as good and bad. But there is. And look at this novel. We have bad where we see disintegration, disharmony, chaos, confusion. And we have good where we see wholeness, restoration. and harmony.
Right.
And so we've got to get a hold of these concepts sometimes and really start to understand in our daily lives. There is good and bad. And what does that mean for our choices and decisions we make?
I love that you said that, Christine, and I love that I love, and this might be sexist to say, but I'm going to say it. I love that's a woman's perspective in a law school classroom.
Yeah.
Right now, maybe men will do it too.
Yeah.
But notions of harm, I take a yoga class. We talk about harmony. I talked about stuff like that in my law school class. Law is about your emotional well-being, but it's not the kind of thing that they often talk about in law school. And so they'll talk about it in this sort of abstract way. And maybe it's not a woman. I shouldn't be sexist about it, but I love that you're doing that because, we talk about a holistic approach in medicine, but there should be a holistic approach in law. And I just thought of that because I think it's kind of true what you're saying. It's about feeling good. Law and order. When we believe that there is order, we are happier. I wrote a book once, and it doesn't matter now, but it's a novel. And I was trying to talk about how peace and love and justice are really the same, different words for the same concept, the same feeling. That if you feel in your heart at peace and you feel love and you feel justice, you feel the same way. So the word is really a distinction without a difference. It's a form over substance distinction that we make all the time as lawyers. It's the same thing and you end up in the same place. And that's why it matters so much. That's really why. So I love that you're talking about those things in your class and getting people to think about them. I'm trying to do the same thing in novels. And I love that you guys picked up on that because this isn't a conversation that I've had elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it's really one whose time may have come.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. In fact, along those lines, this was kind of another thing that leapt out at me. There was a point where one of your characters was thinking about forgiveness and restoration, but stepped back to examine his own role in what happened. And again, I don't want to give away anything, but I'm wondering if you could comment on this idea of, taking responsibility for our part in something, even though on the outside it looks like that was undeserved. But we do often have a role.
Yeah, we do. And of course, anybody who's divorced twice is going to look back and go, it wasn't my fault at all. No, I'm kidding. I just picked the wrong guy. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I look at what I do all the time. I've had 10 years of therapy. Does it show? I'm graduated. Woo! Yep. I'm a big fan of that. Part of the podcast I listen to are self-help. I think it's really important, especially as an author or somebody who wants to write. We're just a person in the world. You have to look to yourself. What did I do to create this situation? And I love that about this character. My dad was a lot like that. Because people who are quieter, and I'm not one, obviously, right? Like you can't, I have caffeine and a microphone. I'm in love with you guys. We're going to have a great time. I'll never shut up. You'll have to at least at 3:00, please leave. But my dad was thoughtful like that. And he often thought, and that's why I know it, I know it's not unique to women. We do it a lot. We're second guessing. We blame ourselves first. But my father was a little bit that way. He would go, I shouldn't have said that. And I was like, Dad, no, that isn't why it happened. And so I love that quality in him. And I love that because as women, we need to change what we'd expect from men. You can't complain that men are toxic when you expect them to be in charge of everything. That's not fair. And so he, to me, I'm in love with this character and he's completely fictional. I'm like, if I met Jason Bennett, I would take him upstairs and teach him a few things. Yep. No.
We love him too. Right? I'm just like, we all love him.
I love God.
We'll have to fight over it.
I love a guy. I love the husband material guy. People are like, I like bad boys. I'm like, I hate bad boys. I've always hated bad boys. Bad boys are bad.
They're bad.
So I wanted to make a character that, was lovable, but also masculine. And I hope I succeeded. And I hope I meet him.
Did. You absolutely did. This book was an absolute must read for our listeners. I know you've all been excited that we're having Lisa on the show, and I know you are going to want to pick this book up immediately. Now, Lisa, you mentioned a little about, can you tell us what you're working on, a little more glimpse of whatever you have coming up on your radar there?
Right. I'm so excited because you write every day. So I was writing until now. And I right here is my horrible screen. I don't know how to declutter. Someday I'll learn how to declutter my screen. I don't know how to do that. And you're in my office with all of my things framed because my self-esteem is so low that I need to frame every single thing.
You
If
deserve
like
it.
if I fart, it goes in a frame. That's basically it.
You
But
deserve
my
it.
dogs are usually in the pictures. I always try to get my dogs in. So it's, but right now I'm so excited because I'm working on a book called Sacred, which is like eternal. About Mussolini's Italy, a love triangle set in Mussolini's fascist time, because fascism is such an interesting subject to me, and Sicily, it gave rise to the mafia in the 1800s. As an Italian American, I'm very interested in that because I think it's been a bad stereotype we have. But I kind of wanted to look at why it came to be and tell that story of the families at that time in the lemon groves of Palermo. And so I'm super excited about that too. I feel so honestly lucky to just be able to write what moves me and hope that it moves other people and to get to talk to you and that you read the book. It's just very kind. I know how busy you are.
Well, we're
And
super lucky that you're still writing, and we're thank you for your beautiful writing and your important voice. And I'm going to tell our listeners, you can connect with Lisa Scottoline at scottoline.com. You can find her on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You could even sign up for her newsletter and get direct notices of what she's got coming. And Lisa, thank you. We can't wait to see your next book. We just love talking to you today. We've been so looking forward to it. We had so much fun. We could go on for 5 more hours easily.
you are so nice, and I love you guys. And Chris and Kristen, thank you so, so much. And fight the good fight, Kristen.
You do the same. You're doing it every day with this writing. I love it.
Oh, honey, thank you so much. You guys are the best. All right,
You're the
take
best.
care now. Stay safe.
Take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Hope to see you again. Just incredible topics there with Lisa Scottoline, and
Oh my goodness.
such a beautiful book. And we can't give away any spoilers, which makes it so tricky. But I want to touch on this notion of, that came out in the book, where justice is not done because the court system is imperfect. Judges are imperfect, lawyers are overworked, as you know, and where you almost have this desire to take this justice in your own hands. And how far would you go? How far should you go? Does it depend upon the hurt that was done to you, that you may think, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to punish this person myself? Or this is an interesting topic. What do you think about this as a lawyer, Kristen?
Yeah, I was fascinated by this aspect of her novel because, when you think about some of the reasons people lose faith in the justice system, you can understand where these feelings come from. It's very slow. Investigations take time, reports take time. We have overburdened government officials and agencies. Sometimes they don't investigate at all. And it doesn't make sense to us because it's something that, if you just investigate it quicker, you would see the answer you need and you can take action. But we don't have that. But also, we also put a lot of justice in the hands of everyday people. And everyday people do not always agree on what would be a just result. So we have jury verdicts that come back sometimes that just don't make sense or cause us to question the system. And so I understand that frustration. I feel that frustration all the time. And I'll tell you something, when it becomes personal, like it did in the story, a family member, you want that justice. You want it to be immediate. You want it to sting and to hurt. We have an interesting concept in the law called punitive damages. And when you bring a lawsuit, you can get your regular damages, and that is compensatory damages to make you whole. But there's this other kind of damages that I think speaks to this idea of revenge, and that is punitive damages. They are designed to punish, and it's usually in an amount that will put a dent in somebody's pocketbook or a corporate pocketbook. And the idea is, you will never do this again. You don't want to do this again because that is how much this is going to sting. And so that idea of revenge, I think, is very much in the law. But when you step outside of the law, taking your own revenge, look at how you're in dangerous territory, right?
Yeah, you are.
We don't know if, for example, that is the actual person who was the reason for the problem. There may be unintended consequences. We may have a bystander who is hurt. Unpredictability comes in when you start talking about lawlessness. So I love these themes that she explored. In fact, in the book, there were these unintended consequences. In fact, a bystander did get hurt. And you can see where, oh, this person is dangerously close to stepping over the edge into complete chaos.
And what about this idea that, say that you had a court case and a verdict came in and it punished, but it wasn't enough punitive in the mind of the person who was wronged? You're going to walk away with an unsatisfied feeling that this wasn't what I had hoped it would be. Yes. And so we have many states who do take that punitive damage to the final degree with the death penalty. And I wonder, like, as someone who's maybe lost a loved one, or someone who's seen their loved one committed a crime upon them that really maybe damaged that person forever, I could see where you could get caught up in this idea. A little bit of me wants to believe that the person who commits the crime, this notion of it's going to come back against them, that you can't live a happy life when you go around doing horrible things to people, that maybe what you sow you reap, that idea that people sometimes call karma, it's going to come back on you. I think sometimes we have to settle with that we aren't in control of everything, but this person, a criminal, has caused such a miserable world around him. How can he not be ultimately be affected by the damage that he's caused? And maybe in that we find a little peace somehow. It's a tricky thing.
It is. In fact, I'm going to go right back to the first thing you were talking about, and that is sometimes even when we go through the legal process, we don't have that satisfaction that justice has been meted out. In fact, a lot of times I hear from people, I want my day in court, I want to go to trial. But as you head towards trial and you go through that process, you realize that it's very rare that you have the opportunity to really get that justice, right? Because when people are testifying, we have prepared. You're not speaking out of turn. You're not volunteering. You don't get the chance to say, and that's what you get for what you did to me, right? Mm-hmm. So I think having that settled peace inside your own heart and your own mind, that you have pursued justice, that you have done everything you can to shine a light on darkness, I think that's where you've sometimes got to get that peace, because it's not necessarily through the justice system.
I love that you said that. So in your own heart, you say, I've done everything I can, and then take it another step further. Go out and be a voice for this cause, for this crime. Start a fundraiser, start a blog, do a podcast, but for whatever, abused women or abused children or crimes of rage or whatever it is that's your cause, there is still something you can do, but maybe it's not to the criminal. Maybe you're just helping the rest of the public and taking that anger and turning it into something good. Yes. That's a great idea. So what's your takeaway? What's on your radar? You got anything that you're leaving this with? I'm
Yes.
sure you do.
Let me tell you, there's something that really struck me out of this book, and Lisa touched on this as well in one of your questions, and that is when there is an incredible stress and strain on a relationship, a lot of people do fall apart. And I was thinking, you're in that crucible. You've got financial woes. You may have an injustice that was done to you. You're facing illness. And we know that a lot of families crumble under the weight of that. And so this book really made me focus, and this is something I'm really taking away, on how do we avoid crumbling under the weight. And I know this. I mean, I have been through very hard situations in my life, like Lisa was talking about, divorce and single parenting. That's a challenge in and of itself, even when things are going well, right? How do you not crumble? And I really enjoyed thinking about that concept. And that's something I'm going to think on further. How about you? What's on your radar?
I like what you said to Lisa in your last question, that we need to sometimes consider if we played a part in this family crisis or whatever's happening. And it's very introspective. It's sometimes very hard to admit. And sure, you might not be at fault, but maybe you did play a little bit of a part. I love that as a takeaway. And I also like the other idea that, okay, if your family is, or you're having a crisis situation, don't feed into it. We sometimes feed into it. So we get very angry, we get very upset. And I always say, this saying is so true. If we treated our friends like we treat our family, we wouldn't have any friends. So when we come home at the end of a bad day, oftentimes we sort of let loose and we're in a bad mood, and we take it out on the people that we love. And maybe there's just a be aware where you're scapegoating, where you're putting your stresses and in places where they don't belong. That's sort of my takeaway.
That's good.
Well, another great book by Lisa Scottoline. She is an amazing intellectual, but funny person. We just adored her. We loved her book. In closing, I want to give a shout out to, as always, our incredibly talented sound engineer, the Mr. Mark Carey. We're going to leave you with the few storm predictions to pique your interest, and maybe you'd even like to read ahead. We have coming up the wonderful Heather Morris and her heart-touching Three Sisters, the spectacular Laura Morelli and her mysterious The Stolen Lady. We have the amazingly beautiful Sandra Brown and her intriguing story, Blind Tiger, the incredible Fiona Davis and the Magnolia Palace, the wonderful Nina de Gramanti and her historical, beautiful book, The Christie Affair. We have our beloved Francine Rivers and her The Lady's Mine, and then Teresa Ann Fowler rounding out our spring sessions with the intriguing It All Comes Down to This. In the meantime, stay on the radar with Kristen and I. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Send us a message if you want to see us in person, or better yet, one of these beloved authors. Come and take a look at our YouTube video.
Until next time, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.